It can be hard to think of your parents as having ever been anything else. But as filmmaker Jeanette Kong discovered in having her father's diaries translated, they were people with big dreams and complex lives too. She uncovered the story of why he immigrated not once, but twice and came to understand the Chinese-Jamaican experience in Canada, no less. It's all in her new film, A Brief Record of My Father's Time at Sea, that has its world broadcast premiere tonight right after this program. And it brings Jeanette Kong back to TVO from the provincial capital tonight. Welcome to the program.
Thanks so much, Dan.
All right, so you've made 4 films on the Chinese-Jamaican experience, but this one was a bit more personal. What inspired you to make it?
Well, I discovered this journal and I didn't know what it was. And my dad didn't explain what it was to me, but he kept it by his bedside table for many years. And then when he died at the age of 80, I took it and placed it beside my bedside table where it stayed for a long time. And then in about 2013, 2014, I had a good friend, an elderly gentleman, Mr. Basil Lee, translate it for me, and I was just so awestruck by his just the detail of the diary and what it was, because I couldn't understand Chinese, I couldn't read it, so it was really just a surprise to find out what it was.
Now, this film took quite a while to put together with all the research that it took place. But in your story in the film, you actually moved to China, and that played a little part in terms of telling the story. What led you to do that?
Well, I went to China with my parents in 1996, and that was very eye-opening for me. I'd always heard about relatives, and then to finally meet them, I felt a connection. But and that was a long, long time ago. And then I did a film called Finding Samuel Lowe, and reconnected with my family there. And then my parents died. After they died, because of this, because of Finding Samuel Lowe, it got me back to China, and then I just felt this real connection to my family there, and then thus was, interested in moving there just to experience what it was like for to live there for a while. What my parents might have experienced living in Canada, because I didn't really know a lot of Chinese. So I had the experience of having the immigrant experience flipped, on me. So
let's talk about your father, Keith Kong. In 1949, he makes the decision to leave his hometown of Shenzhen in Guangdong province for Jamaica. Tell us about that.
Well, my dad was actually born in Jamaica and then left when he was very young. He was only 3 years old. My grandfather was in Jamaica and took the family back. And so my dad grew up in China, but during that time in 1949, life was very hard in China. And some of the relatives in Jamaica needed workers to work in their stores. So my dad had this opportunity, and being the eldest son, wanted to help his family in China so he could send remittances back, and that would help the family.
Now,
so that's why he left.
In your journey through this documentary, you got to see sort of your father's skill at writing. Did you know that he could write like that? They were quite beautiful passages.
No, not at all. It was really, it was very eye-opening to have this glimpse into his interior life. My dad wrote letters, and he always read the newspaper, but no inkling that his writing was as eloquent as it was. So it was a surprise, I have to say.
Now, I want to show a clip from the documentary. This is from an early entry in his journal. And that journal, of course, documents his journey from China all the way to the United States. Let's have a look at that clip.
為了生活的逼迫和未來的幸福促成， 你不能不痛心离别了年老的父亲，年幼的弟妹，離別了故鄉的一切，煙霞重遊，而漂流海外。強人出國，更是我那多愁善感的心情，破碎萬片。
Now, those are quite personal passages. And of course, this was a journal that was stashed away in a suitcase, kept on his bedside table for quite a long time. What was it like to learn of your father's hopes and anxieties at that stage in life?
It was a surprise because, usually, I think for a lot of children of immigrant parents, there's usually a bit of a communication gap. I don't know fluent Hakka. And so, we didn't talk about dreams and hopes and wishes, So it was really great it was very touching and meaningful to know that my dad had, these wishes and also sort of the connection that he had to his family. Oftentimes, sometimes families can lose touch with each other. So I think it was very lucky. He had a real sense of duty. I would say my dad was very dutiful.
You had mentioned Hakka, and in reference to Hakka Chinese. For our viewers who aren't familiar, can you explain sort of Hakka Chinese and sort of its reference there?
Sure. So we're part of the Han majority in China, the Hakka people, but we have a distinct dialect and distinct culture and foods that we eat. And another thing about the Hakka is that they've traveled around the world. So you will find Hakka Chinese people in many, many different countries, from Jamaica, Suriname, India, Malaysia. They're found in all corners of the world, the Hakka people.
Well,
and it actually means guest people.
Guest.
When you do a translation.
Guest people, I should spell it out, Hakka. Speaking of travel, let's talk about your father. After 25 years in Jamaica, he made the decision to migrate again, this time to Canada. There was a lot going on in Jamaica at the time. Can you take us back a little bit about that and what the decision was behind that?
Sure. So Jamaica gained its independence, and then in the 1960s, towards the 1970s, the early 70s, it became sort of unstable politically. And so there was a lot of a rise in violence and crime. And at the time, there was sort of an exodus of Jamaicans out of Jamaica. And so my family was part of that. My dad was very concerned about the rise in crime and violence there. And so he made the decision, he and my mom, to move to Canada. And we came in the early 70s. And
here's a photo here. Can you tell us what we're looking at here?
This is a photo of my family. There's my mom, my dad, of course, and then my sister, and I'm the little girl in front of my sister, and then my three brothers, and then a relative was visiting, and so we took a picture, and this was just outside of our shop that that my parents owned in Kingston.
In Kingston, Jamaica. Very beautiful family.
Yeah.
Identity is something that is complex. It is a journey. You were born in Jamaica, grew up most of your life in Canada. You've connected with your Chinese ancestry. What do you consider yourself to be?
I consider myself to be very multidimensional. So I definitely have all three sides in me. And I think the film really shows that, because you hear me speaking with my Canadian accent, my everyday voice. But then when I'm around my Jamaican relatives, definitely my Jamaican patois comes out. And I cannot speak to anyone from Jamaica, including my relatives, without a Jamaican accent when I'm around them. And then you hear me speaking Hakka in China with my relatives. So definitely. I'm a amalgamation of all three, a mélange, and very, very, appreciative of all three cultures. Definitely.
It was very noticeable in the conversations with Aunt Dottie, who was an amazing, amazing character in your
Yeah.
film as well. You had mentioned, your father. He has since passed, and he wasn't able to see this film. Do you wish your father could see this?
Oh yes, of course. Yeah, for sure. I'm a bit. I was a bit worried, thinking that he might not approve because he was such a private person, And but I think that our family is really a case history for how the Chinese got to Jamaica. My dad was, a lot of men went from China to Jamaica from the 1800s all the way up to the 1970s. So my family really is this case history, and so that's why I wanted to share it. And then, like a lot of Jamaicans, we moved to Canada, and so it's documenting a history of a community that is normally not. You don't know the history, so yeah. So I'm really happy. And I think he would have been very pleased to have it on TVO because he was very, very proud of the fact that I worked at TVO.
That's great to know, and it was a very, very touching story and a personal one. So thank you so much, Jeanette Kong,
Oh,
for sharing
thank
that story,
you.
and thank you for joining us on the program tonight.
Thank you, Gian. Take care.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.